Welcome to Background Basics. Take a deep, slow breath. Whether you're elbow deep in warm, soapy water, stepping out onto a long, quiet trail, or just getting comfortable in bed, ready to let the day go, you are exactly where you need to be. Let your hands do the work. Let your feet find the path, or let your body rest. You handle the physical world, and I will take care of the mental one. Today, we're going to explore a world that is completely real, yet operates on rules so bizarre and complex that it puts ancient mythology to shame. Today, we are walking into the woods. If you have ever stepped into the deep, moss-draped, evergreen woods of the Pacific Northwest, you know the immediate physical shift that happens when you cross the tree line. The temperature drops. The ambient noise of the highway or the town is swallowed by the thick trunks of Douglas firs and western hemlocks. The air smells richer, a sharp, clean mix of pine needles, damp earth and petrichor. It feels like you're stepping into a quiet, still and isolated place, a collection of solitary pillars, each tree standing alone, fighting for its own sunlight and its own water. But that silence is an illusion. And that isolation is a lie. Because right beneath your boots, buried in the damp soil and weaving through the roots, is a bustling biological superhighway. The forest is not a collection of individuals. It is a single, massive, communicating organism connected by something scientists casually refer to as the wood wide web. To understand this, we have to look away from the towering canopies and look down at the fungi. When we think of fungi, we usually just picture mushrooms popping up after a rainstorm. But the mushroom is just the fruit. The actual body of the fungus lives underground, made up of microscopic, thread-like tubes called mycelium. These mycelial threads are incredibly dense. A single footprint of soil can contain miles of these microscopic tubes, and they don't just sit there, they actively seek out the root systems of trees. When they find a root, they don't attack it, they fuse with it. The tree provides the fungus with carbon and sugar that it produces through photosynthesis up in the sun. In exchange, the fungus acts as an impossibly massive extension of the tree's root system, scavenging deep into the earth to pull up water, phosphorus, and nitrogen, feeding it back to the tree. But the mycelium doesn't just connect to one tree, it connects to the next one. And the next one, until an entire forest is physically wired together. Through this biological fiber optic network, trees actually talk to each other. They share resources. If a massive, ancient mother tree is standing in the bright sunlight and a young sapling is struggling in the dark shade of the canopy, the mother tree will actually pump her excess sugar down into her roots through the fungal network and feed the young sapling to keep it alive. They support their own kind even more incredibly. They use this network as an early warning system. If a tree on the edge of the forest is suddenly attacked by a swarm of hungry caterpillars, it doesn't just suffer in silence. As its leaves are chewed, it sends a chemical distress signal down into its roots and through the wood wide web. The signal races through the underground fungal threads, warning the trees deeper in the forest. Long before the caterpillars ever reach them, those deeper trees receive the message and begin pumping their leaves full of bitter, toxic tannins, preparing their defenses for an enemy they haven't even seen yet. So the next time you walk through the woods, know that beneath your feet, millions of messages are firing, resources are being traded, and warnings are being shouted in a silent, chemical language. But this subterranean network is just one way a forest can act as a single, connected entity. To see the ultimate, most extreme version of this, we have to leave the damp evergreens and travel to the high, dry mountains of central Utah. Here, in the Fish Lake National Forest, stands a grove of quaking aspen trees. If you were to drive past it, it wouldn't look particularly unusual. It's a beautiful, dense patch of thousands of trees with stark white bark and small, delicate leaves that flutter and tremble violently in the slightest breeze, which is how they get the name quaking aspen. In the autumn, the entire grove turns a brilliant, blinding, unified shade of golden yellow. But if you were a botanist looking closely, you might notice something strange about this massive grove. All the trees look identical. And when autumn comes, they don't turn yellow over the course of a few weeks like a normal forest. The entire grove, all 106 acres of it, changes color at the exact same time. Like flipping a switch. That is because this is not a forest. It is a single tree. Scientists call it Pando, which is Latin for eye spread. Every single one of the 40,000 tree trunks in this massive grove is a genetically identical clone, shooting up from a single, interconnected, colossal root system. When a normal tree wants to reproduce, it drops seeds. Aspens can do this, but they prefer a much more aggressive tactic. They send roots laterally through the soil, and when the conditions are right, that root shoots a new trunk straight up into the air. Over millennia, this single organism just kept spreading, dropping new trunks, creating an entire forest out of itself. Pando is widely considered to be the heaviest known living organism on the planet, weighing in at over 6,000 metric tons. But its weight isn't the most staggering thing about it. It's the age. Individual aspen trunks don't live forever. After about 100 years, a trunk will die, rot, and fall over. But the root system beneath it just keeps going, sending up a replacement. Because of this, estimating the exact age of Pando is incredibly difficult. But scientists believe this single root system has been continuously alive and growing for roughly 80,000 years. To put that into perspective, when the seed that started Pando first sprouted in the Utah soil, humans hadn't even invented agriculture. The last ice age was still in full swing. Neanderthals were still walking the earth. And through all of human history, the rise and fall of ancient Egypt, the building of the Roman Empire, the Industrial Revolution, Pando was just sitting there, quietly trembling in the wind, dropping old trunks and growing new ones. While Pando is a masterclass in ancient logical survival, other forests offer mysteries that are much more recent and much more visibly bizarre. Imagine leaving the golden rustling leaves of Utah and stepping into a cold, misty morning in western Poland. Just outside the small town of Gryfino, there is a patch of woodland known as the Crooked Forest. It is a grove of about 400 pine trees that look like they were pulled straight out of a dark fairy tale. When you look at a normal pine tree, you expect it to grow straight up toward the sun. But in this specific grove, every single tree emerges from the ground, grows about a foot high, and then takes a sharp, violent 90-degree turn. The trunks grow completely parallel to the ground for a few feet, and then curve back upward in a sweeping, unnatural C shape, reaching for the sky. What makes it even more unsettling is the uniformity. Every single one of these 400 trees is bent in the exact same direction, pointing perfectly due north. Furthermore, this bizarre grove is entirely surrounded by a much larger forest of perfectly normal, straight-growing pine trees. The anomaly is isolated to just this one specific patch. The trees were planted sometime around 1930, but because the local town was devastated and largely abandoned during World War II, the people who planted them and the reasons why they look like this are completely lost to history. Without records, the theories have run wild. Some people suggest that a unique gravitational anomaly in that specific patch of land pulled the young saplings down. But science doesn't support a localized gravity well that only affects wood. Others believe that a heavy snowstorm buried the trees when they were young saplings, weighing them down while the trunks were still pliable. But that doesn't explain why the surrounding forest, which would have experienced the same snowstorm, is perfectly straight. A popular historical theory is that during the invasion of Poland in World War II, enemy tanks rolled directly over this patch of young trees, flattening them to the ground without snapping them, and they simply grew upward from their flattened positions. But the most widely accepted theory among arborists is far more intentional. They believe the trees were manipulated by human hands. Local carpenters or boat builders may have planted the grove and deliberately pinned the saplings to the ground, forcing them to grow with a natural sweeping curve. This pre-bent wood would have been incredibly valuable for making the curved hulls of wooden ships, the rounded frames of furniture, or the yokes for ploughing oxen. But before the carpenters could return to harvest their customized timber, the war broke out. The town was evacuated, the craftsmen never returned, and the forest was left to grow, standing today as an eerie, silent monument to an unfinished project. If the Crooked Forest is a mystery of human interference, our next destination is a testament to the strange, isolating and alien power of nature itself. We have to leave the European mainland entirely and travel to the Arabian Sea, to a small, remote archipelago belonging to Yemen. Welcome to the island of Socotra. Because Socotra has been isolated from the mainland for millions of years, the life here has evolved in a complete biological vacuum. Almost a third of the plant life on this island exists nowhere else on Earth. Walking through its rocky desert landscapes feels like stepping onto the surface of another planet. And the absolute kings of this alien landscape are the dragon's blood trees. Imagine a tree that looks less like a plant and more like a massive, organic, flying saucer. The trunks are thick, pale and bare, rising up from the rocky soil. But at the top, the branches don't spread out wildly. Instead, they form a dense, perfectly flat, umbrella-like canopy of stiff, spiky green leaves. From a distance, a forest of these trees looks like a collection of giant green mushrooms dotting the desert canyons. This strange shape is an evolutionary masterpiece of survival. Socotra is incredibly hot and receives very little rain. However, the island is frequently blanketed in thick morning mists rolling off the ocean. The dense, umbrella-shaped canopy of the dragon's blood tree acts as a giant net, catching the moisture from the mist. The water condenses on the spiky leaves, funnels down the branches, and drops directly onto the shaded root system beneath the tree. It literally creates its own microclimate, watering itself in a desert. But the shape isn't how the tree got its legendary name. The name comes from what happens when you cut into the bark. If you take a knife to the pale trunk of a dragon's blood tree, it doesn't leak normal clear sap. It immediately begins to bleed a thick, dark, crimson resin that looks exactly like human blood. In the ancient world, this red resin was highly prized and surrounded by myth. Local legends claimed the trees first grew from the spilled blood of a dragon that had fought an elephant to the death. The Romans and ancient Greeks would travel incredibly dangerous trade routes just to acquire the resin. They used it as a powerful medicine to coagulate wounds, a dye for the cloaks of royalty, and even as the brilliant red pigment used to paint the armor of gladiators stepping into the Colosseum. Today, the trees are highly endangered, fighting against climate change and grazing goats. But to stand among them, surrounded by bleeding trunks and flying saucer canopies, is to realize just how strange and resilient life on this planet can be. As the sun sets on the arid cliffs of Socotra, it brings us to our final realization about the woods. When the light fades, we tend to think the forest goes to sleep. We associate the woods at night with total pitch-black darkness. But in some patches of the world, the darkness doesn't mean the end of the show. It's simply the time when the forest turns on its own lights. If you were to walk through certain dense, humid forests in Japan, Brazil, or even the Appalachian Mountains in the United States on a pitch-black, moonless night, you might notice a faint, ghostly glow coming from the forest floor. As your eyes adjust, the glow becomes sharper. It isn't a reflection, it is a brilliant, neon green luminescence radiating directly from the rotting logs and fallen leaves. This is bioluminescence. The same chemical reaction that makes a firefly glow in the summer sky, happening right here on the forest floor. In the scientific community, it's a fascinating study of luciferin reacting with oxygen. But in folklore, it has a much more magical name, foxfire. There are over 70 different species of fungi in the world that naturally glow in the dark. Some, like the bitter oyster mushroom, have glowing stems. Others have glowing caps that look like tiny neon green umbrellas sometimes. It isn't the mushroom itself that glows, but the microscopic mycelium threads spreading through a piece of rotting deadwood, making the entire log look like it is burning with a cold green fire. For centuries, foxfire was a source of fear and superstition. Travelers deep in the woods would see the ghostly green lights and believe they were seeing the spirits of the dead or the glowing eyes of fairies trying to lure them off the path and into the swamps. During the American Revolution, it is even said that soldiers used pieces of glowing foxfire wood stuck to their helmets to avoid running into each other during covert, pitch-black night marches. But why does the forest glow? It isn't to scare us. It's an ingenious survival tactic. Remember that fungi need to spread their spores to reproduce. In a dense, dark forest, where there is very little wind to carry the spores, the mushrooms have a problem. So, they create their own neon signs. The glowing green light cuts through the darkness, specifically attracting nocturnal insects like beetles, flies, and ants. The bugs are drawn to the light. They crawl all over the glowing mushroom, and when they fly away, their legs and bodies are covered in microscopic spores, carrying the next generation of the forest miles away. It is a perfect, self-sustaining system. The forest is communicating, adapting, and even illuminating itself entirely independent of us. So as we emerge from the woods and step back into our own lives, take a moment to appreciate whatever you just accomplished. Whether you finally cleared that sink, reached the end of your trail, or are simply letting your mind power down as you drift off to sleep, you've successfully navigated your own environment today. We spend so much of our time trying to manage our own little worlds. It is deeply comforting to know that out there, in the quiet dark of the woods, the earth is managing itself. The trees are talking, the ancient roots are growing, and the forest floor is glowing, whether we are there to see it or not. Thank you for letting Background Basics keep you company today. If you enjoyed this journey through the world's most incredible and mysterious forests, make sure to hit that subscribe button. We have plenty more stories, deep dives, and real-world lore waiting for you the next time you need some background company. Until next time, keep moving, let your mind wander, and remember to look a little closer the next time you step into the trees. Have a great day or a good night's rest.